Good morning, Limitless crew. Happy Monday. I hope you all had a fabulous weekend as always. Today, I want to talk all things emotional eating. It's something that I have struggled with, still struggle with from time to time. And it's been brought up a little bit more in conversations with clients recently. So I want to do a separate in-depth live on the one-on-one on emotional eating, why it happens, and what we can do to stop it or prevent it from happening more frequently. So let's start with this. Do you ever race to the pantry when you are feeling upset, down, frustrated, stressed? You're not alone. It's quite common for people to turn to food for comfort as a way to cope with their feelings. When you eat in response to emotions, it's called emotional eating. Duh, right? And like I said, you're not alone if you do this sometimes. Our bodies need food to survive. And it makes sense that eating lights up the reward system in our brain, and it makes us feel better. Although it may feel like a way to cope in those moments, eating doesn't address the true issue. If you're feeling stressed, anxious, bored, lonely, sad, exhausted, food won't fix those feelings. For some people, this cycle or turning to food to cope triggers feelings of guilt or shame. I've been there. Which can be even tougher feelings to navigate. The thing is, food is at the center of so many things that we do. Food is part of celebrations. Making food for someone going through a rough time is a way to show that you care. Sharing food with others is a way to connect. It's natural to have an emotional connection to food. The goal is to allow yourself to make a conscious decision about when, what, and how you eat. And there's going to be some times where it makes sense for food to be a part of dealing with some big emotions. For other times, there are going to be some better ways to cope. So let's dig in a little bit deeper here. What causes someone to eat because of their emotions? Almost anything can trigger a desire to eat, but common reasons include work stress, financial stressors, health issues, relationships, family, friends, kids, people who follow really restrictive diets or have been on a dieting roller coaster for most of their life are likely more to emotional eat. And then somebody who just has emotional dysregulation, an inability to manage their emotions may struggle a little bit more. Emotional eating is often, it's an automatic behavior. The more food that we use to cope, the more established that habit becomes. So why food? There's many reasons why eating becomes a way to cope. Difficult emotions may lead to like a feeling of emptiness or an emotional void. Another reason is eating releases dopamine. We are on a dopamine overdrive these days. Dopamine is a brain chemical that makes us feel good. Also, we develop habits and routines. You might develop a habit, how can I put this? When you're stressed. Let's just, because that's quite common. When you are stressed, you might always reach for food without even realizing it. And on top of that, it's everywhere. It is on every street corner. It's quickly ordered from your phone with a couple clicks. There are commercials galore on TV. We are inundated with pictures of food, Instagram, Pinterest, TV, advertisements. There's posters, well, not posters, but signs in our neighborhood advertising all the new restaurants, right? It's everywhere. So how do you know if you're an emotional eater? One, you are out of control around certain foods. Two, you have an urge to eat when dealing with powerful, strong emotions. Three, you have an urge to eat when you're not physically hungry. And four, food feels like it calms you, it rewards you, it relaxes you. So how do we stop emotional eating? I've got 5 tips for you today. Number 1 is to start an emotion diary, the journal club. If you hung out with me for a while, I will sometimes suggest journaling to get you to think more critically or deeply about why you might do certain things. And the same thing goes with emotional eating. The more you understand your habits, the better. Eating in response to an emotion can happen automatically, like I just said. So the more you understand how you feel when you do certain things, the better your chance of changing those things, of changing that behavior. So try keeping a diary, a journal, notes in your phone, keeping a record of those times when you eat, but you're not necessarily physically hungry, or you feel somewhat out of control around a certain food. And make note of, what was happening at that time. How are you feeling? And 3, any emotions that you noticed when you got the urge to eat. And I guess the hardest part is probably trying not to judge yourself while you are doing this activity. Get genuinely curious about your actions, your behaviors, your habits as to why this is happening when you eat in response to a specific emotion. And this takes practice, so be kind to yourself. It doesn't have to be perfect. It never has to be perfect. The thing is, once you get more info about yourself, your emotions, your situations, your thoughts, you can start to make positive change. If you notice that you always eat when you are stressed, then stress is what needs attention. Think about some things you can do to better handle your stress. And gosh, there's so many things, and it's different for everybody, but music, dancing, movement, any movement in general. It can be 1 minute of just changing your state, your physical state, can be so incredibly powerful. It can be calling a friend, it can be going for a walk, it could be sipping on tea, doing a puzzle, busying your hands, removing yourself from the environment, the kitchen per se. If you notice that you eat when you are bored, then you might want to consider ways to manage your boredom. What else could you do to fill your time? Can be similar to what I just said about stress. It can be playing with your kids, it can be playing with your pet, it can be a new hobby, whatever it is that truly brings you joy, reading a book. Second thing is moving your body. Briefly touched on that, but it is such a powerful way to manage your stress, to manage anxiety, to manage strong emotions. Any type of movement doesn't have to be crazy intense, doesn't have to be sweaty. It can be yoga, it can be stretching, it can be going for a walk around the block. Again, it can be dancing, as I mentioned. Any type of movement, changing your state is so powerful in changing your emotions. Number 3 is practicing mindfulness. And I talk a lot about this, but practicing mindfulness means paying attention to your present moment. Examples can be sitting and just focusing on your breathing, focusing on if there's like gurgles or your body's making any sounds, like truly being in tune with your body temperature, how you feel. So powerful. Another thing can be just doing a body scan from the top of your head down to your toes and noticing if there's any areas of tension and sending energy, releasing energy to those areas. Another thing can be guided meditation. Another thing can be focusing on your senses. So focusing on what you see around you, what you hear around you, what you can touch, maybe taste, hear, those sorts of things. And I guess mindful eating can be brought into that as well, which is actually going to be something I'll talk about in point number 4, is making sure you get enough to eat. Our brains are wired to make sure that we eat enough for survival. So you might notice imbalances in your mood. You might notice more cravings if you are not eating enough. That is such a huge tip, because I know as women, we tend to overeat. I would say, undereat. I'd say 90% of women do truly undereat, and then that leads to overeating or emotional eating. And then it's this vicious cycle of undereating, overeating, guilty feelings, shame, whatever else you're associating with it. Another thing you can do is schedule your meetings, schedule your eating as meetings, to make sure that you are eating enough. Doesn't have to be these big, extravagant meals, but making sure you're having some snacks in between your meals if you find yourself just too ravenous and overeating, and then getting those feelings of guilt once again. And then that brings me to minimizing distractions and mindful eating, which I briefly touched on. Eating in a present state without your phone is beneficial in so many ways when it comes to emotional eating, but also for optimizing digestion. And last but not least is working on positive self-talk. Become more aware of the stories that you are telling yourself. It might be helpful to write some of these things down, just like I mentioned earlier in this live. Mention those negative thoughts, write them down. Actually seeing them on paper, there's something so therapeutic about that, as opposed to always having these thoughts in your heads. And some things that you might say that you want to replace with a more positive thought is, I overate again. What can we replace that with? I wonder why that happened again. Get curious about why that happened. It's a much gentler approach, and it's going to allow you to work through why it might be happening. A second thing is, I can't believe I messed up again. What can we change that to? We all make mistakes. I can view this as a learning opportunity. Way more powerful, gentle, allows you to be more introspective about why that might be happening. And remember, you don't have to believe everything that your brain says. It doesn't always make sense. A lot of times my brain does not make sense. Get curious about where these thoughts might be coming from. And once you're aware of them, you have the capability, the power to work on changing them. And consider how you would talk to your closest friend, your kids, your relatives, people you love, and use that language on yourself. So I'm going to wrap things up here. Making positive change is an opportunity to get more in touch with yourself and your feelings. And like I said, it's the first step in, maybe not the first step, it is a step in learning why this is happening, and then of course leading you to make positive change. And if you're feeling uncomfortable with your eating habits, do not hesitate to reach out for support. I have been there, and I'm here for you. So yeah, I've got some resources. We can chat about it if you are struggling. And I can give you just like concrete advice. I know I gave you quite a few tips, but sometimes we just need to be told like, this is what you need to start with just to get the ball rolling in terms of making change. So let me know if you've got questions, and I hope you have a fab Monday. Talk to you soon.